Sunday, April 24th, 2022, the second Sunday of Easter. The Gospel today presents two apparitions of Jesus to the Sunday community of the disciples. The resurrection of Christ had begun to gather the dispersed disciples back together. When Jesus was arrested, the disciples scattered. Most of them disappeared in ways that would offend the leader who moved and lived with them for 3 years. One of them betrayed him. The most senior among them denied him 3 times. And now, the risen Christ welcomes them back with peace and joy. No sign of condemnation to those who had deserted him. The overwhelming feeling of being forgiven was enough to gather them together into a community. A community, the church, was being formed around the resurrection and forgiveness. There is a memorable scene from the movie 2012 about how we build a new world, a new community. Adrian, the scientist, challenges the politicians' decisions to exclude the people who worked to build the safety ships for the time of the flood from entering those ships. He asks, "If we start our future with an act of cruelty, what will we tell our children and their children?" His intervention would finally change the mind of the politicians to accept the poor people into the ship. What is important is how we build a new community of the resurrection. What stories are we to tell the next generation? Jesus certainly began the narrative with the story of forgiveness, but he wanted his disciples to continue this story, to tell it to their next generation. So the risen Lord offers peace, first to their troubled hearts. He also wants the disciples to start the new community with a deep conviction of hope and resurrection. We also find Jesus replacing the sad story of the Emmaus disciples with the story of hope and resurrection. Jesus builds them into a community of strong faith, one that can witness to the resurrection. He allays the doubts of the disciples about the truth of the resurrection. Not all the disciples believed in the resurrection. St. John portrays the Apostle Thomas as the symbol of all doubting disciples. Thomas refuses to believe unless he touches the wounded side of Christ. Jesus invites him to do exactly that, to touch and to believe. His obstinacy vanishes, and he makes his confession of faith, "My Lord and my God." He actually believes without touching, though many paintings show that Thomas touched. Well, I guess they are not scriptural. The invitation to all who doubt is to gather with those who have experienced the Lord, and then they will believe without seeing. While the disciples were involved in the story of resurrection and hope, the temple authorities were crafting another story, a story of theft of the body and the failure of the soldiers guarding the tomb. They developed a story founded on lies. In fact, our societies are still spinning such false stories about themselves and about others. Some stories are founded on lies and others on hatred. Yet, there are others who fashion stories of care, of love, and of compassion. We must be mindful of the stories that we use to narrate ourselves and that others use to narrate us. When we become part of the stories of hope and resurrection, we are witnesses to the risen Christ.